Does it blow your mind how big the iPlayer is now?
Well, once upon a time,
Anthony Rose, founder and CEO of one of the UK's most recognized and sought-after business platforms, SeedLegals, often referred to as the man behind the BBC iPlayer.
I just want the customer experience to be awesome.
Anthony has brought his pioneering vision to SeedLegals, where over a third of all UK investments now benefit from its services.
Level 1 is what would BT do? You should never ever do that.
His platform automates critical tasks, transforming how businesses raise investment, hire and retain talent, and accelerate growth.
Those founders are wonderful, and it's so exciting and interesting to see all the things that people are working on. So,
community-led and product-led. This is genius.
what I was going to do is go to the local supermarket, buy a nice box of Lindt chocolates, and then I'll go and say, I will give you this box of Lindt chocolates if you come downstairs and test my product.
Today's episode is brought to you by Profile, a PR agency that turns entrepreneurs and CEOs into industry leaders through media coverage, LinkedIn, and video.
LinkedIn, media, and speaking opportunities are often an afterthought, especially for CEOs. They just don't have the time. That's where Profile step in. They take care of everything. They're an end-to-end service, so you can hand over the profile building to them and worry about driving the growth of your business.
So if you've got a story to tell and you want to build a profile as an entrepreneur or industry leader, you can find out more by going to www.welcometoprofile.com.
Okay, so basically here's what's happened, which is once upon a time, we all knew that we had to round up all the investors to get on the bus and go together. And funding round was like a major thing. And for investors, they liked the concept that it was really tough for founders. You know, it was like a Sparta thing. You die on the mountain or survive. But for founders, that's miserable, right? So what would happen is you'd spend months trying to find investors, and some would go, yeah, I'm in. You go, great, come back in October, 3 months' time when I've got my round. But you don't need £1 million now. You just need 50,000 now so you can get your design or outsource or your developer. So funding rounds is this weird thing where you tell investors you need a certain amount of money, and then they all get corralled together and all sign this shareholders agreement and so on together, and now you've got your money. But it takes a long time to get there, and you have to get all of them together before you go anywhere. And in the meantime, you've got no money and you can't build your product. So I guess it sort of always used to be like that. And it used to be like that because if you tell an investor, I need £1 million to get to the next milestone, they don't want to be the only schmuck who's invested and you haven't got your £1 million. So for investors, the failure to raise a funding round was like, oh, thank God we didn't get involved with that. So why and how has that changed? Well, what's happened is there's now something called an advanced subscription agreement. In the US, it's called a SAFE. We call it a seed fast. That's our brand name. We introduced it in 2018. We didn't invent it, but we productized it. And since 2018, it's just been gathering momentum. And the funding round is now essentially the dinosaur. So what happens is with the seed fast, instead of waiting for all the investors to get together to sign the term sheet, you find an investor and they go, that's great, I'm in. And you say, can I send you a seed fast? And a seed fast is kind of like an IOU for shares. So you're going to give me money and I will promise to give you shares when I do my funding round later. But to incentivize you to come in now, I'll give you a 10 or 20% discount on what the investors will pay later. So I've got your money now and I can grow the business. And then since the UK startup ecosystem runs on SEIS and EIS tax deductions, for those who don't know it, if you're an angel investor and you invest in a company, you get these SEIS deductions. You can deduct 50% of your investment from your income tax. So if I invest 20K, I take 10K off my income tax. It's awesome. And if I keep my shares for 3 years and sell them then, I pay no capital gains tax. And if the company goes bang, I can tax deduct the loss. So angel investors are looking for their tax deductions. Now, HMRC have a rule which says if you invest and get shares later, no more than 6 months can go by. So when you create a seed fast, you're also saying, if I do a funding round, I'll give you shares at a 10 or 20% discount compared to the investors in the round. And if I don't do a funding round in 6 months, it will convert at a 2 million valuation, as if we'd done a funding round. So as an investor, you're protected both ways. And as a founder, you're going to give shares regardless. And that's the new way of doing it. And now what's really interesting is when we started and launched this in 2018, the pattern was, okay, great, I'm going to raise 500K. But a couple of people have said they'd like to come in early. All right, great. So you'd have people doing a few seed fasts for a smaller amount, maybe 10 or 20% of the funding round. But then slowly, the amounts raised before the funding round got bigger and bigger to be like, now the entire funding round is just seed fast and you don't bother with the funding round almost. So there are kind of two patterns. One of them is now, which is I want to raise, let's say, £1 million. I need some money now. I'll get some fraction of that in now while I go hunt for that mythical lead investor to lead the round. And the other one is stuff it the whole round. Far too complicated. I'm just going to keep meeting people and getting their investment, and I'll give them shares in 6 months, not even bother with the concept of a round, which isn't quite what we had in mind when we launched it. But what's really interesting is investors previously saw the failure of a founder to do a funding round as a bad thing. And I've wanted to reinvent that and turn it and make it the opposite, which is if you're spending all your time, corralling investors when you could be running your business and using the money to build something, that's the fail. So where this really changed was in 21, 22, when valuations dropped, interest rates went up, and companies found that they couldn't raise at the valuation they wanted. So let's say you wanted to raise £1 million. Previously, you could get a 5 million valuation, you'd give away 15% equity, and then you could only get a 3 million valuation. So you're giving away too much equity. Or you just couldn't find investors for your £1 million round. So what would you do? Well, you could have a smaller round and raise less, or you go, kind of forget the concept of a round. I'm just going to, get individual seed fasts and we'll figure out the rest later. And
So are SeedLegals playing a matchmaker, or are you facilitating the role between the entrepreneur seeking investment and the angels, or are you having a direct role in partnering those two up?
That is a great point. So, as Reid Hoffman says, the LinkedIn guy, first build a utility and then build a network. So, it's like a third of all early stage investments are now done on SeedLegals. And we think about a quarter of the angel investors in the UK are on SeedLegals. So when we started, it's just a utility, don't get ahead of yourself. I just want to help you do your legals, make it easier than going somewhere else. And that's it. But now you've got lots of people on the platform. Clearly the next thing is, since founders keep calling us saying, can you do investor intros? So, launch SeedLegals deals to connect founders to investors. Our challenge is that one post in one of the founder WhatsApp groups, and we've got inundated with so many companies going, help us find investors. So we have to gently do it. But I don't want to do just another crowdfunding platform. Those websites you go to with like acres of little widgets and your eyes glaze over.
Yeah.
It's like walking through Westfield Shopping Centre. There's just endless numbers of shops, and how do you choose which to go into? So can we come up with something different? So I'm thinking of doing founder interviews. So I get in a studio with the founder.
Like us.
Exactly. And it's like, tell us about the problem and what got you out of bed this morning or a few months ago to want to solve this, and, tell us how it works. So the idea isn't really to promote investment, it's to bring out really interesting founders, and then they can use that material to go out to investors. And then also we can use that material to reach out to investors to connect.
Yes.
So that's SeedLegals Deals, which we softly launching at the moment.
Okay, cool.
So, we're sat here in the heart of the legal world in London. And when you launched back in 2018, 2019, was it your intention to essentially be a modernized law firm, or did you always have this idea that you were going to pivot into this much larger product?
So, great point. Firstly, when we started, the idea was, people spend lots of money on lawyers. It takes forever. The lawyers make mistakes. Cap tables are a nightmare. There needs to be tech, involved. It makes no sense that if I want to, do some contract with you, I have to tell this person what I want and this lawyer, and then I spend hundreds of pounds an hour with them, and then they talk to another lawyer to argue, and then they tell you, and neither of us really know what the document is. That there should be computers to do this, and you should be empowered. So when we started, it was all about just the legals. But then we realized what founders want is that nobody wants legals. You want empowerment, you want knowledge. So you can now use data to show people, oh, by the way, this deal term is important, and this one don't bother with. And 98% of the time people choose this, or 60% of the time they choose that. So now you've got knowledge, because usually there was, in the past, an information asymmetry. Investors knew more, at least VCs, and founders knew less, so they could get taken advantage of. So now founders would have data to help them. And but when we started, to go back to your question, we didn't know whether we would be building like the AWS of legals, in other words, lots of developers, and we'd never talk to another human, or whether it would be a law firm with a fancy website. And I desperately didn't want a law firm with a fancy website. Oh, this needs to be a platform play. But we didn't know what the answer was. And actually it turned out that the model has worked itself out, which is people love the platform. It's on 24/7 and so on, but they also love talking to a human. So we've got a nice customer support team, legal team, median 5-minute response time on web chat. There's no meter that's ticking. I like to think, what would a law firm do? I'm going to do completely the opposite.
Absolutely, yeah.
So,
and actually, if I may just raise a point, because on your website, as you go on SeedLegals, people may be familiar, I have the option to engage with your platform and sign up, understand through lots of different articles, but I also have the option to actually book in there and then with an expert or ring your office. And although trivial, it's actually quite rare to find companies and platforms now including that aspect of person-to-person immediate engagement where I can ring you or I can book straight in with an expert. Is that something you've included because that's kind of a characteristic of the legal world, or is that something you've included because you as a founder are kind of keen to make sure that your customers can engage with you straight away, human to human?
I like to think it's there because I just want the customer experience to be awesome. So, I like the team to think what would be the best experience you can offer for a customer. And I do all the final interviews with everyone we hire at SeedLegals, and I explain on a call, if it's a customer support role, that I like to think of customer support in sort of 3 levels. Level 1 is what would BT do? You should never ever do that. So it's like it's like turn it off and on again or something. It's going to tell you something. If you're intelligent, you would have not called them because you would have tried this already. It's telling you the bleeding obvious. So never do that. So let's say a customer calls and says, my cap table numbers don't match company house. Level 1 would be, well, you can go to the cap table and you can sort by this and sort by that. Then you can look on company house, and if anything isn't right, you can change it. It's like, dude, that's not helpful. So level 2 is you go to you investigate yourself. So you can look at the person's cap table, you can look in company's house and go, I found that, Alice has got 1 fewer share here. So you basically, and I think this is one of the most fun parts of the job I probably as CEO should be doing less customer support, but people call me personally and I love the Sherlock Holmes sleuthing, there's something wrong in the cap table somewhere and we have to find it. And so level 2 is you research it, you log in, it's on the platform, you can see the cap table, you check elsewhere, you look in company's house, you're a director here, but you're not here, and you tell the person, okay, I found the problem, and here's how to correct it. But you can go further.
Sorry.
If you can grab water, that would be amazing. But you can go further. Level 3 is where you imagine that somebody says, I've got a problem with the cap table. You write to them going, I've found the problem and here's what to do. But by the way, let me know and I will fix it for you. You have to be careful not to fix it yourself because you can't just change someone's cap table. But then you might add, by the way, I see your 7-day free trial is about to expire. I've given you another 60 days on me. So I like to think if I were talking to a company, what would it be? And I'm amazed at how rubbish most companies' customer support is. You can't find a place to call them. You've got a problem. There's no one. It's like I've interacted, and then there's nothing there when I need you.
But sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But out of interest, because we have this internal debate with our ambitions and our vision for what we're trying to build, and although it's early days for us, we see even for other startups, there are some founders who are led on that customer experience and live in the mind of the customer, what would be the best possible outcome here and the best possible experience. But then, like you said earlier on, it has to be a platform play. So then you get the sort of nuts and bolts saying, oh, well, if we provide everybody personal hands-on customer service, we can't scale this globally or whatever. And I was curious just to know where you sit with that. Sort of, will you maintain that customer service and that engagement over the sort of scalability of the business?
It's a great question, which is, can you build a scalable business with that sort of personalized support? Because it's always tempting to go, let's not do it. I think for me, building that great business that people love is more important. One day it might change, but more important, well, rather that is the path to success. Yes, I could halve my support team or something like that. Where it becomes super interesting is now in the age of AI, can you have AI-driven chatbots without people? And so when you use web chat on SeedLegals, you get a human, you don't get an AI. I've built an AI chatbot, but AI hallucinates just a bit too much. But what's really interesting also, and here's a top tip for, I think any company, is what often happens is you've got your developers, sometimes founders are tech people, they're introverts. They would just like to build stuff. So they sit in an office somewhere and they do coding, and somewhere else there are people going to their website. And the two are different worlds, but what you want to do is you want to connect them. And so the very first thing I think every company should do is put one of those chat bubble widgets on the website. You can use Intercom, you can use HubSpot, there are others. And then have it pop up and ask a question. Don't go, is there anything we can help with? Because that's like, okay, I don't know. I'd like to go on holiday. But ask, are you doing a funding round or you want to create an option scheme? So create some engagement. And I think that turns a drive-by into an acquisition or a lead or a discussion. And then firstly, it gets people to engage. And secondly, you get to learn what they're really looking for, because otherwise people come to your website and then go away and you've no idea what you've missed. And you also can use this for product development. Hey, do you have one of these agreements? And the team know by the third time somebody's asked you the same question, post it in our Slack channel, our ideas channel, and I might personally, if it's simple, code it that evening. Maybe people say, I can't figure out how to find my share certificates. Okay, great. Let's improve the hint text or something like that.
Right.
So everything in the company is revolved around the customer experience. But then how can you do it in an efficient way? So I also like to think, the third time someone asks, let's use a technology solution. So thing one is just answer manually. Whatever it takes, figure it out. But then let's try to do it so we don't need to do it again manually next time, which could mean doing an article, doing a video, adding hint text, maybe a new product feature. So you constantly use technology to put yourself out of business. So for me, that's the formula that I really love, which is you try to be awesome at your own time and cost to help somebody solve a problem. But if you just do that, you'll have a giant bloated company and never a proper scalable business.
Yes.
But you keep using that to do it more efficiently each time.
Yeah.
Are SeedLegals now above the educational requirement? And what I mean by that is, do you still find that you are spending any time educating founders of companies that they need this legal support? Or are you beyond that now, whereby people are just thinking, we need SeedLegals?
Well, there are two parts to the question. One of them is, do I need a law firm or is there a platform? And then on a person-by-person basis, what help do founders need? And sometimes that's surprising. So, when we started SeedLegals, it was hard. I was personally sitting on a beanbag doing Skype calls, because that was the days before Zoom, and people go, this sounds really good. How many funding rounds have you done? As in, should I trust you? And you'd go, 3. And that was kind of hard. And then you'd have to have early adopters who'd, buy into trusting you or take a punt or something like that. But now if you can go kind of like a third of them, or thousands, it becomes much easier. So I think what happens is people tell their friends. Some people don't interact with anyone else, and they go through the same curve of, I need something. Do I need a lawyer? Shouldn't download on the internet. Wait, there's a platform that's a bit more than downloads on the internet. Oh, and their people will help and they can book a call. So they go through that whole anger, denial, acceptance curve. And others just have, hey, 3 people said, I need to use your platform, so I'm calling you to use your platform. Or the best one for me is, my investor insisted I use your platform, so I'll use it. So there's that sort of general acceptance. But the other part of your question is, for a given founder, what do they really want? Do they want legal advice? And I mean, one of the nice things in the UK, thanks to legal reform, you can give legal advice without being a law firm. So we don't need to feel that we can answer this question and we can't answer that. Of course, we don't claim to be a law firm, but you asked me something about, will my co-founder, what percent equity should I give them? It's not a legal question. It's a commercial question. It's probably more like a psychological question than anything else. So what you find actually is, the starting assumption was people are going to ask us a lot of legal questions. This section in the articles that talks about a liquidation preference, turns out nobody cares about that. The vast majority of questions that people ask are, how do I find investors? I'm having a split with my co-founder. What should I do next? Or my investors ask for, preference shares. Should I give them preference shares? So what's really interesting is when you hire people to join, particularly your customer support team, turns out lots of people in the UK study law at prestigious universities and then decide they don't want to join a law firm, and then they call SeedLegals. So we're actually a net, probably one of the larger hirers of law grads,
and they're all the cheery ones because they didn't become a lawyer.
Well, they want to join.
I passed the bar 10 years ago, so can I have a job?
And I often ask, why are you calling us? Why are you not talking to a law firm? And it turns out that some of them have they've done their paralegal stuff at a law firm, and they've got this hierarchy and partner thing and so on. And it's amazing that law firms haven't reinvented themselves, just the way they work internally. Because if they're hemorrhaging people for just the internal way of working, it seems mental. Why can't you just behave like a startup internally?
Well, actually, that gives me an opportunity to ask you about one of the rare challenges, or, if I was to ask, considering the age-old sort of antiqued model they are running, what stops SeedLegal from having more of the market share?
Well, I think, so why do people use law firms? Well, firstly, they want to do things that we don't do. I need a commercial contract, or I've got a dispute. The reserved matters in the UK mean that certain things you can't do unless you're a law firm. Secondly, sometimes people outgrow SeedLegals. I want to raise 20 million and mine, I think I need a lawyer. I don't think they do, but they think they do. Sometimes an investor says you have to use a law firm. Sometimes the investor provides the legals and they, sometimes they haven't heard of us. So I like to think about, if a third of companies are using us, that's awesome. But somewhere they're 2/3 not, and where's the funnel and how do we get there? And then the question is, have you reached a plateau, or will it, doing more events or pay-per-click advertising or whatever it is, going to get more? This remains to be seen.
So I suppose a scalability issue with law firms is every country. I mean, in the US, for example, every state has its own jurisdiction. I suppose that isn't a restrictor for you, for SeedLegals.
Well, so we're in, US, France, and Ireland. countries are, of course, very different. Not only the legal documents, of course, in France, it's mostly in French and French law and so on, but also the legal freedom to operate is different. In the UK, we can answer any question. In France, you can't give legal advice. You can't employ a lawyer. You have to work with a third-party lawyer. So life is more complicated. In Germany, where we don't operate, you have to have a notary physically reading documents. It's insane. You know, it's like, I think it was designed in the days when the peasants couldn't read and people had to read things. But life's moved on. You know, it's a jobs worth scheme, you know, scheme to keep people in business. It should have been out of business like 400 years ago to still read contracts. It's mental. So it's different in each country. But, you know, the reality is if you pick a country like the UK, the vast majority of investors invest in companies and founders in the same country as them. Maybe 20% of the time in funding rounds, you've got investors from outside the UK. But if you're an investor, you're familiar with your local legals, you want to meet the founders, you understand the market locally. So there's usually a good fit between founders and investors. So for us, the challenge is, if we want to expand it into other countries, the cost of being in a different country is much higher than just being a community where you just go, great, you can enter from anywhere. And the discussion will all be in English or something. So we have to pick more strategically which countries we do. And the big focus for us right now is the US. So, you know, we want to launch it in the US in late 2024. I'll probably spend a fair bit of time in New York. And it's a big bet because people know us in the UK. For me, being in the US, it's probably going to be starting all over again, kind of literally sitting on a beanbag doing calls, people going, how many rounds have you guys done? I go, in the US, 3. So, you know, do you know what you're talking about? Well, I know what I'm talking about over there. I'm not sure about here. But
how will you go about securing the first few founders to use in the US?
I think I did that already this morning.
Okay.
By someone asked a question in one of the WhatsApp groups that we're a member of. And I've said, oh, by the way, we're launching in the US later this year. And it was like, already I got my first compliment of people going, that's awesome. Call me when you're here.
Oh, cool.
So, I mean, it's a slight joke. But no, I mean, it's hard work to try and, find customers. And by the way, you know, for anyone watching, I think there are two approaches to finding customers, PLG and CLG.
Community-led and product-led.
Exactly.
This is genius.
Product-led growth and community-led growth. So product-led growth is probably your more traditional way of doing things, which is I'm going to build a product and they will come. And if I add more features, more people will come. Or if I make more products, more people will come. And it works in some areas, and of course, in a sense, it always works. But how do you find those customers? They're not just going to find you. So you have to advertise and so on. And sometimes you have to buy advertising. Maybe it's content marketing and others. But another technique is community-led growth, where you identify a community, you become part of the community, you create, and then people tell each other, and you know, you become more prominent in the community. And so I think what's fascinating, I didn't know any of this when we started SeedLegals, but obviously startup founders are a community. They hang out in the same places, they go to the same webinars, the same physical events, you know, most of them are in London. So if you can identify a community and you can be part of that community and be valuable, that is fantastic. And so, you know, we and I personally have worked super hard in the UK to be part of the startup community, whether it be on WhatsApp groups or, you know, Slack founder groups or physical events. I want us to be everywhere and be useful and answer questions and so on. But now in the US, I don't know any of these communities. They don't know us. So you have to kind of start all over again.
What do you think about physical events, out of interest?
Physical events are great, and then they disappeared for a few years completely. And then the question is, are they back or not? I think physical events work well when you've got a compact city, so that people will go to physical events. I think one of the challenge now is pre-COVID, most people were at work during the day. So if you had an event at 6 p.m.
Yes.
before they went home, they would go to the event. But now people are at home most of the time. Are you going to be asked to go to an event and get out of house, particularly in winter when it's cold and rainy and dark and so on? So
the digital events that you run, because I know you guys do regular digital events. Out of interest, from a networking perspective, because I haven't participated in one ever, are the participants able to network with each other? Because of course that's the fun of a physical event, is that you're there with a common purpose. So you're learning while also meeting other people in the same kind of situation as yourself.
Right, and that's really the challenge. So physical events are generally broadcasts. Okay, we're going to do a webinar with somebody on how to do LinkedIn outreach. So you're going to listen in, and yes, you can ask questions, but people are speaking at you, so to speak. Whereas a physical event, that's where the mingling happens.
The mingle.
Which is cool. And for founders, physical events are super important because if you're an investor, you see many founders. And some of them jump out as being investable. And what makes them jump out? Well, it could be the idea they've got, but more often it's just the sort of personality. So as a founder, you want to learn to walk the walk and talk the talk. There's a certain bravado, not being dialed up to 11 like Americans are, because it crosses over the line a bit, but to be sufficiently confident and optimistic and super enthusiastic, and then knowing the terms. Someone says, will I get drag along rights? And instead of going, what on earth are you talking about? You get, 75% drag along, or, will I get my SEIS or a liquidation preference? And actually founder pitch events, when you watch other people pitch, most founders are not great at pitching, whether it be the pitch deck or in person. And the only way you really learn is by watching others. So those physical events, I think, are fantastic. And most founders are wonderful, and it's so exciting and interesting to see all the things that people are working on. So physical events are hard to beat, but it's a pain to get out of house to go to them. So,
When you do your move into the US, do you have an idea in your mind as to how... this is really for the other entrepreneurs listening, founders listening. As you break into that market, let's say it's going well and you get your first 3 and your first 10 and your first 20. Do you have a rough idea in your mind as when you start to deploy and build a team out there geographically, and what that kind of first 6 months might look like in a kind of optimistic future?
Great question. And I don't know the answer, but here's some thoughts, which is... talking to some people investors and so on, they say the number one mistake people make when moving to the US is they go and hire a very expensive marketing person to head up the US. And then they discover the only thing this person can market is themselves, because Americans are so full of themselves that you meet somebody and go, they're awesome. It turns out like they're all like that, but you exactly. And so now you've got this very expensive person. Maybe it's $200,000 a year. You're paying them or more, and you're not seeing any success. And you're now spending large amounts of the company's time and money on the US. So a few things to note. One of them, the common wisdom is go early or go late, but don't go in the middle, which means, if you're two founders, get on a plane, go to the valley, go in a garage or whatever, and go build your business there, or wait until you're doing, 10 million pounds a year revenue in the UK. You've got a stable product, and now you can afford to spend a few million on a US expansion. But don't go when you're still trying to build your UK product and you've got limited revenue, because you'll be spreading yourself too thin.
Right. So the first US customers will be helped and fulfilled by the UK team.
Well, so that's the next thing, which is I did a webinar with a company called ScaleWise, the founder who helps companies expand to the US. And so let's say, I go, great, I want to be in the US. We should raise $10 million and spend 10 million. That's probably what's one way of doing it if money's freely available. But actually, the suggestion is you do it in 3 stages. Stage 1 is you spend 1% of your resource on this foreign expansion. The CEO gets on a plane with a couple of people in sales, marketing, whatever, heads off to the city. You're not hiring really much locally, and you're doing your product market fit discovery and trying to find customers. And because the CEO's there, you're building your brand, you're talking to investors and so on. And if that works, if it doesn't work, you get on the plane and come back again. If it works, then next step is you spend maybe 5% of your company's resources. So now you're building up a local team, you're hiring, it's costing you a substantial amount, but you've got some revenue, hopefully, and you've also got the confidence that you've got some product market fit. And step 3 is you go and raise tens of millions and then, take over the world.
So does that mean, sorry, I mean, I know I'm taking, you don't have confidence per se yet, because we're not stage 2 of the US expansion, which seems crazy to me because you've expanded so quickly in the UK. I feel like if I was in your position, I would just be like, well, anywhere I deploy SeedLegals is going to be fantastic because we've had such a, now that we do our community-led growth, we've mastered it in the UK. What potential obstacles, I suppose, do you see in the US of preventing the same kind of success you've had here in the UK?
So it's a great question. How much of the farm are you going to bet on that, right? So
I'll bet my farm. I think it's going to go well.
Yeah, it's my farm that goes out of business if I bet wrong.
Yes, yeah.
So it's nice to have a brave bet, but I think there's no obvious right or wrong, but all markets are different. In the UK, the startup ecosystem is a lot of angel rounds with SEIs and EIs, but that doesn't exist in the US. In the US, you can't have the same freedom to operate legally, so we may not be able to offer the same legal advice as we can, so we have to have a different lawyer engagement model. And it may turn out that everyone in the US goes, that SeedLegals is great, but we're still going to use a lawyer because our investors told us. So we have to discover all of these, and it's a bit too ballsy to go, let's skip all that, and we're going to pretend it doesn't exist.
Yeah, gotcha.
So early indications are great, but there's nothing like, being on a call. At the end of the call, the person goes, yep, I'm in, sign me up first. Interesting. Let me look around and call a lawyer first and get back to you later.
Right.
Is there an advisory capacity to SeedLegals in the sense of, say you've had 15,000 applications have come through your doors. Is there ever a temptation to be like, this business is almost right, have you thought about doing this? Or do you just, no, hands off, we're just here to help with the raise and everything else that we offer?
Well, a lot of founders personally reach out to me for advice, pitch deck feedback, and so on. I always want to be nice. I'm probably a lousy CEO because I try far too hard to be nice to people and spend far too much time helping on that than I should perhaps be doing. But I'm always delighted subject to. So usually you'll get like a 2 a.m. Loom video from me with pitch deck feedback, which is sometimes a bit brutal, not because of 2 a.m., but if I just go, it's awesome, that's nice, but useless. So I need to go through it. And also, using my own mantra of by the third time you've done something, come up with a more scalable solution. So I'll do a video on, how to create a better pitch deck or interview somebody and so on. But founders are always looking for advice. They're voraciously looking for advice, and you'd love to give them advice. But there are 2 problems with giving advice. One of them is it doesn't scale. At least if you can have someone who's a law grad that can help you on your funding round, answer all your legal questions, because they know that. It's by the 3rd or 5th time you've done it, you know this very well. But you can't have any random person give you useful feedback on, should I be B2B or a B2C company, or my B2B is not taking off, should I pivot? You can't have a 20-something going, yeah, that's a great idea, I think you should pivot. I mean, it would be mental to try and do that. So it can only be a few people in the business who can reasonably do that. So people reach out to me, but it doesn't scale. But the other problem is kind of the bull in the china shop problem, which is, if you break it, you bought it, so to speak. So where I get quite worried is occasionally I'll give somebody some feedback. They call me and go, can you look at my pitch deck? And inevitably I go to the homepage because that's where it all starts. And the usual problem on both pitch decks and homepages is that companies show how clever they are and what they do, but nobody gives a fuck. It's all about the problem that you're solving. So we use blockchain and distributed ledger, to enable e-commerce. It's like, great, but why would I use you? Whereas if you change it to, the fastest way to do X, or something is broken, we're the best way to do that. And now it's better. So I would often explain to people, change it from what you do to the problem you solve for your customer. So imagine, pick the persona. You want something you're selling to the NHS. Don't say medical is broken or something. Imagine the doctor at the NHS, which is finally a faster way to do X. Sign up here or book a demo.
Yes.
Where I get a bit worried is where customer or the person I've given the feedback goes, great, that was amazing, Anthony. I'm just going to change my whole homepage based on your feedback. It's like, oh my God, what if it's all wrong?
It was just a 2 a.m. loo. It wasn't meant to change
and then they call later and go, oh, wise one, we've done it. It doesn't work. What to do next? You go, fucked if I know.
Right, yeah.
So, so you have to be a bit careful.
Yeah.
So, rule one is, there are no good or bad ideas.
Yeah.
At least if I think an idea is good or bad, it's irrelevant. It's really about thoughts on thinking about who your target audience is, the so-called ICP, ideal customer profile. Make a mental model or even draw a picture of who that person will be. If you're selling it into a company, are you selling to the founders or the CEO? Are you selling to the finance department? Are you selling to the HR department? And just sorting those will help you. There are a lot of companies doing mental health products, but looking at their website, they clearly haven't thought about who the purchasing decision maker is in the company. If it's the finance department, you're going to talk about how it will save the company money. If it's the legal department, it will save them risk or something like that, or avoid problems. If it's the HR team, it will be how it makes everyone happier and their life easier and save them time. So make sure you've got your customer profile. So it's those kind of things. And you can see, the things people are asking us for, it's well beyond legal advice. And I think that's the sort of unassailable advantage that we've got. If you go to a law firm and you go, can you help with my webpage? They'll go, dude, we can't, but it's going to cost you £100 an hour or whatever. And in our case...
Is he not tempted to charge 50?
Well, no, I mean, the whole point is to not charge.
Sure.
But because then it's a different proposition. But I mean, if we can help with those things, I mean, it's not scalable and it's not the business, but there might be an interesting partner opportunity with others who can do that as well.
You were just talking. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just because we were on it. I was just you mentioned £100, but we're talking about pricing. So, what is the pricing structure for SeedLegals for someone who's watching this and decides I need to use this?
Okay, so we've got two parts to our pricing. One of them is we call for the small things you need all the time. So that's a SaaS model. So it's either £49 or £99 a month. The 99 one, which is our £990 a year plus model, comes with a whole lot of extra stuff included, free if you want advance assurance, and you get a seed fast free and so on. So basically that gives you your cap table and all those little documents you need for one, fixed price. And you can make unlimited numbers of NDAs and founder agreements and hiring agreements and the works. And then when it comes to fundraising, we charge based on a sliding scale because bigger rounds take more time. And since there's unlimited help and support, so that scales with the amount that you want to raise. But broadly, if you're looking to raise £250,000, it's going to cost you £2,500. And we've got something called Flex. So you don't need to decide beforehand, are you going to raise with Seed Fast or are you going to do a funding round? You say, I'd like to raise 250k, great, that's £2,500. And now you can mix and match any number of Seed Fasts and a funding round and change your mind. And I think that's great because, when you start a funding round, you have no idea whether you're going to get to your target. You don't know if you're going to find a lead investor. You don't know if you're going to abandon the concept of a round and go with Seed Fast. And here you can turn on a dime. Oh, I was doing a funding round, but I only got like a third of the investment stuff, and I'm just going to go with Seed Fast instead. And you can just change. And I think those are the sort of things that technology enables that you just can't do the old way. Oh, great, we've sent you 73 Word documents. These will all be cancelled and we'll give you new ones. So,
right, yeah.
Did you get that? Sorry. Did you get that pricing structure right from the off, or is that evolved over time?
That has evolved over time for a few reasons. Pricing is the most difficult thing, I think. Come out with something people love. You can work at that until they say they love it. And, if a very important thing for me is that as a founder, you're a user of your own product. So, I mean, if you're making a taxi ride-hailing app, you should use your own app. In this case, I can't imagine running my business not on SeedLegals. When I need to hire someone, it takes like literally 60 seconds to make an employment contract, and I can clone a previous one, but it won't put in the other person's salary or their details. It clones just the key deal terms and things like that. So using your own product is important. And now I forgot the other part of the question, which was
I was just wondering if it evolved over time.
Oh yeah, right. So the evolution, yes. So it evolved firstly because you have more products. When we started, it was like £19 a month, but there were only like 3 agreements. Then you've got a lot more. So it became 29, and then it became 49 because you're including a lot more. And of course, there's inflation over the last 6 years. The other reason it evolves is it's interesting that from investors in our business, in any business, investors love subscription billing. They like recurring revenue. And actually, for those who are looking to raise investment, investors will usually value recurring revenue at 3 to 4 times one-off revenue. So there's constant pressure as a business yourself to have recurring revenue models. And when we talk to investors, they go, what % of your revenue is, one-off versus recurring? If the answer is less than 50%, recurring, they go, nice, come back later. So it's interesting. So there's a quest for recurring revenue, but recurring revenue sometimes aligns with what a customer wants. So, you've got an annual subscription plan and you can log in anytime. Great. But people don't necessarily think about funding round as a recurring thing. I just want to raise my 250K and then I'm done, If it worked nicely, I'll call you again. Otherwise, I don't want to keep paying you until I need it again. So, yes, we keep tweaking things to see what works. And as you have new ideas. So once upon a time, you charge just for a funding round. And then we notice people buying all these seed fasts. And instead of buying each seed fast, can you just come up with this flex concept? I want to raise anyway. So you try it with some customers and they go, that looks great. And so great, you launch that and that becomes a thing. Or you launch it and it's sort of not so great and nobody wants it. And so you iterate. So I love the idea of iterating on pricing as readily as you iterate on products. But it doesn't quite work as easily because if somebody signed up for something at a particular price point, you can't just change it on them. So you have to keep supporting that price point kind of like for years more. And that makes, technically, it's a lot more complicated. And every time you change pricing, particularly if it goes up, you're going to annoy people. So even though you'd love to be agile on pricing, it comes with a lot of stickiness that lets you not do that as easily.
Yes, that's one of the rare joys of having sort of 1 or 2 customers on your beginning part of the journey, isn't it? Because you just ring them up and explain the situation, but you can't do that later on. We've talked about people and platform, and I'm conscious of time. So I want to, we talked about platform and product, but I'd love to talk about people. We're inside your office in Holborn at the moment. And I think I read online that you've grown to, actually, I won't misquote it. How big is the team now?
We've got about 160 people.
160 people.
Some in France, a couple in Ireland, the rest in the UK. And there are probably, 40 people in the office today. So people are in the office, hybrid, maybe a couple of days a week people will come in.
And we've been into a lot of offices now, and we're not going to name any names, but some offices are more lively and have a sense of purpose than others. What is an office really? It's just the people inside of it. And I can hear while we've been sat chatting, there's clapping and applauding going on, which is fun, And out of curiosity, you don't have to keep it in, but what are the typical kind of events that cause the team to burst into applause?
When people are working remotely, you want people to feel part of a community. So there's a lot of that on Slack. So everything we do, we try to turn into a community event. So our customer support team, if they've got questions, they'll post on a Slack channel. When customers say nice things about us, which is quite frequent, fortunately, we've got a customer quotes Slack channels. So probably some of the high fives are when people, post a nice NPS score or a Google review, or just write to somebody that might copy and paste it, put it in the channel saying, so-and-so was amazing, or something like that, or I've just got my SEIS in record time. Sometimes it's in the payments channel when a customer buys a funding round or something.
Nice.
So the sales team might be applauding. So the idea is to turn things into fun, collaborative events.
But I think it's a really effective strategy, and I love to make successes out of things which have got nothing to do with money per se, and enjoy the other areas. And it's nice to hear that. When we talk about people and growth, I was also curious to kind of understand from your sort of seeing the marketplace ahead. You had this thing you mentioned in another talk. It was #NoAI, and you and I kind of align on that a little bit, because I have this concern that businesses are shooting themselves in the foot a little bit by sort of scaling their outreach and all the rest of it, because it's not people to people. But I was curious as you grow your team, how do you feel about an augmented workforce, and that, because you see that's trending quite a lot now, where companies divide, so they have half a team of internal, and then they have half a team per sort of extended augmented, working on their sort of more sort of routine functions.
You mean working remotely?
I'm talking about outsourcing.
Outsourced.
Yeah.
Well, once upon a time, I was insistent that everyone would be in the office, and I would only hire people who are permanent employees and not contractors. I'm not a fan of contractors, because I think contractors are like being on drugs. You think that it's going to give you a temporary hit, and it will slowly kill you.
Right.
And because it's very expensive, you think, oh, I just need a contractor to do one thing, but then they stick around. You're just hemorrhaging money. Right. I like everyone to feel that they're part of the long-term success of the company. So thing one, everyone's an employee and everyone's in the office. And then COVID arrives. They say, hey, you're not in the office. No one's in the office. And then, all right, you can be in the office if you want or not. But I'm still insistent on hiring people who can plausibly be in the office. So, typically London and surrounds. And if you're in the office once a week, that's great. Some, might be further afield, but I still like it to be a permanent employee. And the more face time you can get, it's great. It varies by teams. Our customer support and sales team, particularly customer support, are often quite young. Younger people often have less nice apartments, so they want the camaraderie, and it's very much a team thing. So they're going to be in the office, whereas developers probably are happy to not talk to another human being and will happily be at home, and are a lot harder to get into the office. Yeah. So, but it's, so my goal when, COVID hit was how to retain the community, whether you, and camaraderie, whether you're physically together or not.
Yeah. I suppose it's aspects like your AI, I like the way that you've introduced your AI into the website. You've done it where you're aware of the power and possibility of a customer experience from using AI, but you've done it tentatively, where you've made it very separate to you, which is explore the AI chatbot at your own sort of peril, but maybe it'll deliver great results. But if you want to build that out, let's say that became a popular area of SeedLegals, and you wanted to build out, you'd be sort of forced to hire a very sort of from a very sort of competitive pool of talent to get the right kind of people to build that AI product to work just as you wanted it with LLMs, as opposed to outsourcing. So would you decide as you move forward, we'll recruit the people to build the tools, not have the tools built by other people?
It's a great question. I think one of the joys of having a wonderful team that feels part of the success of the company, and creating an environment where people are encouraged to be mini entrepreneurs themselves and product people themselves, is everyone has ideas. So when you're outsourcing, you have to write the spec and then get somebody to build it. And if you know exactly what you want, okay, great, outsourcing is fine. But it's much more fun and I think efficient if people in the team have ideas themselves. So, I want us to be doing a lot more AI things. AI is not just a chatbot. Of course, a chatbot is great if you can type a question at any hour of the day or night and get back a reasonable answer. And then, maybe it says this is, so-and-so the chatbot, but if you want a human, push this button, or you can choose, I want an instant response or I want a human response. All of these things will be possible, but you can use AI for so much more. And one of the things, for example, is if you use us, SeedLegals, for your SEIS or EIS, Advanced Assurance application, we automate it, but a human will check the responses. And a human one of our support team will go through your pitch deck to make sure you're not saying things that will get you disqualified. And they've actually got a 48-point checklist of things that they'll go through.
Wow.
So, of course, it takes time, but we get great results on our advanced assurance applications, but can we use AI to make it more efficient for us? So in that case, actually, we have a Monday morning team stand up on Zoom, and I usually like it when we do product demos and so on. And actually this week was the support team who demoed their development that they had done to create a sort of an AI checker for that. So they had worked with the data team to connect to the SQL database and pull out the answers and then write a set of rules so that it could essentially create an email to the customer for reviewing the advanced assurance application. But we're not about to, launch it on an unsuspecting world. Humans are going to check it, and then they can check the boxes. So it's essentially a class of thing you could call human in the middle, which you're going to hear a lot more of. So it would say, I've come up with this list of things, but then you would approve or reject them all. And had we outsourced things, no one would ever have either thought to do it or taken the initiative to do it, or being able to connect with others in the company. So, our support team, law grads, connected to the data team, who then wandered around and spoke to the developers to get access to things, and then, went to somebody else to get whatever permissions needed to connect different things together. It's so cool that you can enable that.
So would you recommend that even for an MVP creation? So if a team or a founder is creating their MVP, you see a lot of outsourcing for MVPs. But in fact, then off the basis of that sort of, if we follow that logic, and I actually agree with it, if you're able to create your MVP as a team and then get some traction off that, you have a far more ability to kind of create it in the way you want it created. I know we're talking on a sort of product point of view, but
I agree, but there's a catch-22. So you want to create your MVP. So you need one or two, you need a front-end developer, you need a back-end developer, you need a designer, you need a product person. So it's like 4 people you need. And if you can raise enough to afford to hire these people and can wait to find them, that is your ideal way to go. But of course, if you can't, what do you do? And that's where outsourcing comes in. So when you outsource the development, I think an important thing that I don't know if people really think through, and it's important, is this initial prototype or MVP, is it intentionally being designed to be thrown away? Or is this going to be built on to become your full thing later? Yes. And you should keep that in mind, because if you are building it to throw away, you find some developer, they want to do it in Python or whatever, knock yourself out. It's just going to be a demo. But if you don't think it through, you've got this person doing it in Python, and then you now have to hire more Python developers, or you're constantly trying to patch it or make it go faster, and that was the wrong choice of language or whatever. So knowing which way you want to go will then set you with the right choices initially, rather than having bought a pickup truck but you really wanted a sports car and you're kind of trying to saw bits off it.
Fair enough. And that's when you bring in the Anthony Rose chocolate challenge. Which, by the way, I say it in jest, but it's actually genius, and we really took that on board, and I think it's a good story about when you were, if you were creating iPlayer, I think it was.
Yeah, so this is the chocolate challenge, was back in iPlayer days where lots of things didn't work, and I made a list of like 100 things that didn't work, and I went to the developers, and they went, no, that's just you, and no one else watches that program. I know it's only because you're on Windows, and they had a good answer for all of them. And I went, well, that's fine. But even if 1 in 100 people has any of these problems, there are 100 of these problems. For most people, it's just not going to work. And they went, no, dude, it's just you. So you have to persuade your developers, and you can either persuade them by trying to order them, but that's like trying to herd cats. It just never works. So the developers are usually proud, and if they see a real person struggling with it, so I thought this is the way to do it. So I'm going to find somebody to do some testing. So I went to the BBC, I found there's a test, group, and they said, yeah, we can arrange outsourced testing. It'll cost £20,000 and take 6 weeks. I went, there's no way I'm spending £20,000, because this is an iterative thing, right? You do testing, then you do more testing. We'll be bankrupt. And I don't have 6 weeks to wait. So that's no good at all. So I thought I need a non-technical person. So I went to the 5th floor, which is where the legal team hang out, and I thought what I was going to do is go to the local supermarket, buy a nice box of Lindt chocolates, and then I'll go and say, I will give you this box of Lindt chocolates if you come downstairs and test my product. And it was great. The person, we scheduled a time, got 20 of the developers in a room with a big giant TV, and then said to the person, great, welcome to iPlayer, pick your favorite show, go find it. It was a disaster, and everyone's jaws dropped and went, oh shit, there really is a huge problem here. He was right with all those bugs. and I discovered a whole things I never thought about. So for me, all the problems were super technical ones, but actually the person had a completely different problems. So, for example, on the first test session, which was like half an hour of trying to make anything work, and eventually they found the program they wanted and went, I'm not going to download it. It's like, oh my God, you spent so long finding it. Why not? Oh no, it's a Jonathan Ross show, and they didn't show who the guest was. I would never have guessed that. Right. So it was kind of like the metadata problem. As a tech guy, I was thinking the bit streaming and the compression quality and the buffering and stuff like that. And they were like, I don't know about any of that stuff. Who's the guest on the show? So you, by finding real users and doing testing, you discover all the things that you never thought about and all these assumptions that you'd made. Yes. So the chocolate test was great, which was basically testing is actually, in a sense, conceptually easy. Just find an actual user of your service. You can give them literally a box of chocolates or just ask them to test, exactly, and then have your developers sit around with you. And this is essentially the art of customer-driven development. And when I did this, I hadn't read any of the literature. I was kind of making it up as I went along. It's just like, if I find somebody who the developers will go, oh my God, when it doesn't work, I'm going to learn and we're going to learn. And then I said to the developers at the end of this, okay, that was a bit of a disaster. What we're going to do, we're going to collectively figure out the 3 biggest things we can fix. And we're going to, in 48 hours, do this again. Okay, it took us like a week or whatever, and we fixed like 5 things. Then we did it again, and the next time was kind of better. And actually the 3rd time was brilliant. The person said, I like EastEnders. Oh, there it is. Click. Oh, it plays. Like, job done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
15 boxes of chocolate. That's all it took.
Exactly.
Yeah, this is good advice.
Does it blow your mind how big the iPlayer is now and how it's used in that way? Where, for example, at home, I don't have an aerial, a digital aerial. I just go on my TV and click iPlayer, and every BBC content I consume is through that app.
So, I mean, it obviously it's nice that the technology is good, but it's the BBC's great content, which is the key thing. And I have to say, this last World Cup soccer was the first time I have not watched through, the aerial. I went with my wife. It's the only time we turn on our giant TV. I'd love a giant TV, but I never watch. It's always on my computer. So this is our annual event for watching. And it turned out that I think the people in the building, the aerial had fallen over or something. We didn't have an aerial at all.
Right.
So, okay, that was, I threw out my set-top box, literally, and just went, on the Netflix box. Okay, great. Pull up the iPlayer app, and it worked better than the aerial. I never need an aerial ever again. It's great. But, now we just take it for granted. But then there were giant discussions with the internet fall over. The ISPs were campaigning to Parliament to have the BBC pay them for bandwidth and, rolling out new cables. There was a giant debate at the time, but it was kind of like, it was weird, which was, I'm going to enable your business to sell more to your customers, and you want me to pay you? You should just capitalize on that by having a competitive offering, watch unlimited streaming or whatever it is. But obviously the world's going to change. You see, Moore's law, CPU doubles every 18 months, bandwidth the same. This is a short-term problem. Think about the long term.
Well, Anthony, I think, I'm conscious of time here, and before we end, I think, we count ourselves fortunate. There's a lot of founders out there who would love to sit around a table and chat with you, just to share their pitch ideas or get your feedback. And so I thought it'd be best to ask, sat where you're sat at the moment and looking forward, what kind of products are exciting to you, and what are you kind of interested in seeing the growth of at the moment? If you were to choose a few summits from the landscape around you.
Well, clearly the elephant in the room is AI, right? So the challenge with AI right now, I think we're beginning to see the beginnings of the over-exuberance on AI, that Gartner hype cycle of hype, and then the trough of depression and so on. You already see articles saying AI companies are overvalued, don't have a business model. So I want to use AI, but not screw up things by not make the experience worse for anyone. But as a founder, your challenge is, in the world of AI, in our world, we're disrupting an existing industry. If we don't embrace change ourselves, we're going to wake up one day and see we're disrupted. But on the other hand, if you've got a great business, how much effort are you going to go to disrupt yourself? So I think this is fascinating, because as a founder, when you start a company, you're rolling the dice. It's kind of binary. You're dead or you've got something. So you're going to bet everything on people are going to want your product. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then you have to figure out something else to do. But once you've grown a business and you've got decent revenue and you've got customers and business is growing, if you don't do it, you could go, great, I'll increase efficiency, get rid of all those developers, they cost a lot, I've got a great platform, but you're going to be dead because you're not innovating yourself and someone else will eat your lunch. On the flip side, if you just bet everything on some crazy new idea, that's a risk that you didn't need to take. So the interesting problem for me is, if you've got a great business, if you're doing a good fraction of early stage funding rounds in the UK, that's nice, but obviously it puts a cap on your potential growth. So you have to do something else. And picking the next thing to do when you've got a growing business and you didn't have to do something else is, I think, to me, the existentially really interesting question.
Yes.
Right? So if things are not working, you will desperately pick anything to do. But if things are working, you can choose to do nothing, but that's a bad idea. So for me, the interesting one, obviously the big bet is our US expansion, but also on using AI, because there's so much you could do, but I haven't jumped on it maybe as forcefully as I should have. I'm quite intrigued.
Yeah. Me too. I don't think there's any consumption of AI really happening yet. I think the consumer, the best founders are the consumers of their own product, as you said so correctly. And I don't know, I get excited about AI because of its possibilities, but I don't find myself regularly consuming AI. I can use it here and there. And so it's like, oh, you have the option to create your own LLM, or then what? I can't put myself in the shoes of a customer where I'm sort of delivering a fantastic AI product. I'm sure some will come.
So to go to that hashtag no AI, which I've coined, I hope to make a thing. So if you're watching the podcast, back in Insta days some years ago, there was a no filters moment, which was genuine content. And I think we're going to see the hashtag no AI moment. I love AI, but if you see a resume where someone's clearly used AI, it's just horrible. And a LinkedIn outreach post which is written by it, you just recognize it. So how will AI get better so you can't recognize it? But it's got this sort of banality to it on that sort of outreach. And I like this things that I do to be like genuine Anthony. So if you see a post, it's not AI.
I start deliberately putting typos in now, so they know I'm not AI.
I would never make a mistake.
Well, actually, I've looked at a couple of legal tech companies that have AI generated documents. One of them had someone else's details in the documents, so it's like, nice. The AI sourced information, didn't know to remove company details. Like, okay, that's a bit embarrassing.
It's a little bit dangerous, yeah. And we're big believers in that too, which is why we're part of the driving force behind us wanting to be on site and in person, because it's been with COVID and now AI coming along. It's almost like you've got to fight the tide to get back people to people. And
but if I can make an AI avatar of me and I can speak any language, then I can be at the beach while it does my webinars and so on.
Yes.
I don't know.
But you'd miss the webinars. That's the truth of it, isn't it? You'd miss the webinars.
Exactly. I'd get bored.
You'd be at the beach thinking about it. Brilliant. Okay, well, Anthony, thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
so much.
for chatting with us today. It's been a real pleasure. Learned a great deal, and it's very exciting to see how the US expansion takes place in late fall. We'll be watching from the sidelines. And yeah, great to meet you.
Okay, likewise. Thank you.